Good morning, friends. I've been thinking a lot this morning about the idea that God is beyond all place and beyond all time. So as I sit here in California in early September, I am reaching out to you by way of this clumsy interface, this recording process. But God, who is outside of time and outside of space, I pray will make us close in heart nonetheless, and that there might be some things that I share in our brief time this morning that will help and encourage you. I hope perhaps even in some remarkable ways. God can do so much beyond anything we know how to ask or think. And while it is my heart's desire that we might be together live and in person, it is God's good will for some reason that we're doing this in a way that is virtual and remote. But there's nothing virtual about the love and the connection that we have as friends. So thank you for the privilege of spending a few moments with you today. The title of my talk is Bandersnatch, a Blueprint for Resonators. As we get started, I want you to imagine a meeting of C.S. Lewis, J.R.R. Tolkien, and the Inklings. Here we are at Magdalen College in Oxford. Can you see the stone buildings, the tall spires, the long hallways, the smooth green lawns? The Inklings arrive in C.S. Lewis's room. It's a shabby room on the second floor with overstuffed furniture and a small fire in the fireplace. There are books, books, and more books everywhere you look. Bookcase after bookcase, stuffed 2 and 3 deep. Warren Lewis is there, C.S. Lewis's older brother, and it is his duty to make a pot of tea. Tolkien is there, and he has a thick chunk of loose papers resting on his knee. It's a new section of his book about hobbits. And if Charles Williams happens to drop in to this particular evening meeting, he is smoking cigarette after cigarette and tapping his foot nervously for the time to begin. If it's a typical meeting of the Inklings, then 5 or maybe 6 are gathered there. It's 9 p.m. on a Thursday, and it's a cool and somewhat rainy evening. Can you picture it? Here's my question. Once they are gathered and everyone is settled into their comfy couch or chair, what do they do? It's a writer's group. What is the core activity that occupies their time this evening? Think about it for just a minute. What do you see them doing? Well, you may remember that C.S. Lewis begins each meeting by lighting his pipe, looking around at the people assembled there, and then saying, well, has nobody got anything to read us? Is that how you pictured it? Someone will pull out a manuscript, they read through their rough draft out loud, and then everybody pounces with critique. They listen to each author and then they try to find mistakes and fix them. They look for weaknesses in the description or in the essay or in the argument or the illustrations. And then they try to improve the work that has been placed before them. They look for possibilities in those readings. And then they challenge each other and work together to make their books the best they can be. At a Thursday night meeting of the Inklings, the focus is on manuscripts, and the activity, the prime directive of those meetings, is to look for problems and fix them. When we think about writing groups or artist groups, get-togethers of creative people, we tend to imagine that critique is at the center of that particular activity. Now, I want to tell you, I love critique groups. I need critique groups. But what if there's a larger picture? When we think about gatherings, what if there's something bigger and beyond just that single kind of activity? What if this one meeting, this Thursday night of the Inklings, or other kinds of critique gatherings are only one event that takes place within a huge network of meetings and a very, very wide range of different kinds of activities that characterize that group? Well, my book Bandersnatch offers you a blueprint of these different facets of good writers groups, good artists groups, good friendships among creative people. It shows some of the different ways that all of us can get the full range of support that we need to do our best work, no matter what kind of creative work we do, and no matter where we are in that process, beginners or seasoned and established artists. Today, in the time we have, I want to talk just a little bit about one aspect of that network of support. I want to shift us off of the idea of critique, and I want to shift us to a larger, I think, a bigger perspective. So here's what I want you to do right now as we're making this paradigm shift. I want you to do this. I want you to shift in your chair just a little bit. Just shift over to the left, shift over to the right, move around a little bit, maybe a quick stretch. You've just shifted physically. Good, good job. Now I want to create a small but significant mental shift as well. Listen, on Thursday nights, the Inklings focused on the manuscript, making the manuscript the best it could be. Today, this morning, I want to encourage you to think not so much about the work, the story, the essay, the song, the painting, the concert, not so much on the work, but on the needs of the person who made it. On Thursday nights, the Inklings focused on finding problems and fixing them. Today, this morning, I want to encourage you to think not so much about what needs to be fixed and corrected and improved, not so much on giving advice, solving problems, but I want to invite you to focus on how we can get better at offering some different types of help and support to one another. So these are the two shifts, two paradigm shifts, shifts in the way that we think, from the work to the person, from what isn't working to a new focus on what is good and true and beautiful. Do you see the difference? Let me be clear. The Inklings did this too. They did this constantly. We just don't normally see how important it was to their network of support. We need people to look at our work and help us to improve it. We do. But we also need resonators, people who offer us the help and support we need to succeed. I want to mention just 5 specific activities, 5 activities that characterize people who are getting really good at being resonators. I'm going to take the first 2 together. And the first 2 are praise and encouragement. I'm going to take them together because I think that they're both important, but they're often confused with one another. Praise and encouragement. So as I've already suggested, praise is oriented toward the work itself, toward the song, toward the concert, toward the painting, toward the sketch, toward the quilt, toward the thing that's being made. When we praise something, we say that that thing is good. The thing has value. The thing has worth. The thing is accomplishing the purpose for which it was made. And we need praise, and we need to know that something is working and that something is good. But I'll share something from my own experience. You know, this is going to sound maybe a little peculiar to you, but go with me here. When someone gives me praise for something that I've done, when someone says something like, that was a great article that was in that journal, or I loved your chapter in that new Advent devotional, that's praise for the product. And while I appreciate that, crave it and need it to some extent, there's a weird thing that happens for me as a creator when someone praises my work. And that is, for some reason, it sort of triggers an insecure response. So instead of thinking, thank you, I think it wasn't as good as I wanted it to be. It didn't turn out the way that I had hoped. Or, yeah, it wasn't too bad, but it's kind of a fluke, and I could never do something like that again. Praise is great, but you know what's even more powerful is encouragement, because encouragement is directed toward the person, not the product. And it is a acknowledgement, a recognition, a calling forth, and even blessing some quality that you see in that person. So if someone says, you're writing, your work as a writer just keeps on getting better and better, or you're so clear in the way that you express these ideas, or you help me to think about things in a way I've never thought them before, that somehow, I don't know what it is, but I can't throw up the barrier of resistance when someone is encouraging me and mentioning or calling forth or naming the things that they see in me as a creator. So how about if we want to be good resonators, if we do both praise and encouragement, but we realize that sometimes we can reframe or rephrase something as encouragement, and realize that for some reason that I really don't understand, often those words of encouragement go deeper into the heart of the artist and become that rich fuel for future projects. So we've talked about two things, praise and encouragement. The third one I want to talk about is the value of modeling, of being a role model. Sometimes people only see the end product of what we do. They read a manuscript that's been published in a book. They see the final version of a painting or hear the final video of a talk. And they don't see the 14 versions that came before. They don't see the messy middle. They don't see the struggle that was part of it. I want to challenge you to think about how you can invite other people to encounter your work, not only in the final, pretty, polished, perfected versions, but in the midst of the drafts and the redrafts and the uncertainties and the false starts. What would it look like to invite one another more and more into the process? Practically speaking, one of the ways that we can do that is simply inviting people when we're permitted to be physically distant or physically connected to one another, inviting people into our studios, into our literal process, to watch us, to be with us, to talk with us as we work. When I work with ceramics, it's fun to have people come along, to let them try some things on the potter's wheel, and for them to see how I do what I do when I'm working on that wheel. Writers can do this too by having what are called parallel play sessions. They can invite other writers to be working at the same time they're working, and they can work to, each individual can be working on whatever project they're working on. I have found during this quarantine and during our restrictions in terms of getting together, that one of the things that has helped me more than anything else in terms of getting writing done is setting up a weekly parallel play session with another friend who's also a writer. So we get together every Wednesday morning. We got together this morning as it happens, and we get together for 2 hours. We do it by Zoom. We meet, we talk about how our work has gone that particular week. We spend a couple of minutes talking about our goal for the next 2 hours, and then we pray for one another, and then we go to work. During that 2-hour span, we don't talk, we don't interact, we're not critiquing, we're not sharing our work, we're working on our own thing. But knowing that Hannah is there and that she's working at the same time that I'm working somehow gives me a supernatural focus. I tend to stay on track and on task at a much higher level, just knowing that she's working by my side. Now, we're not physically in the same place at all. She's in Virginia, I'm in California, but it is amazing to me how not only do we get an awful lot done during that time, at the end when we check in with each other, she may have written 1,000, 2,000 words of her novel. when we get to the end, I may have researched and written a page and a half, 2 pages of the manuscript that I'm working on right now. But not only that, we share at the end what our goal is for the week to come. And so we have a sense of someone who's going to be checking in with us later and seeing how we did, if we did the thing that we were hoping to do, if we made progress in the meantime. And that has revolutionized my work to such an extent that even after we get off that call, I'll often spend an extra hour or two continuing the work because I've got a good amount of momentum going. Parallel play. You get together, you're working on separate things, but you're checking in with each other and you're taking advantage of the things that can happen as we gather and model the kinds of processes that we have for the creative work that we do. The fourth thing I want to talk about is the idea of anticipation. I like the word anticipation. I don't like the word accountability. Accountability always sounds like somebody who's going to be like holding you accountable and scolding if you don't get it. But think about accountability in terms of anticipation. You said you were going to work on that. I'm waiting. I'm excited. I want to see how you're going to bring that about, how you're going to bring that into existence. This is such a simple gift, the gift of anticipation. It requires that we pay attention and we follow up. So over the course of this day, you're going to hear someone say, I'm working on a novel, or I'm working on a series of paintings, or I'm getting photographs ready for a show, or I have an idea for a poetry collection and I hope to kind of pull it together, or I have a manuscript and a book proposal and I just need to get the courage to send it out. And take note of those opportunities and see if anticipation might be one of the things that you need in order to do the follow through to make that thing happen. How cool would it be if a week from now, 2 weeks from now, you sent a text or an email or reached out on Facebook and said, hey, you said you were working on that thing. How's that thing going? How is the development of it happening for you? And is there anything I can do to support you in that process? That's not accountability in the sense of you're in for a scolding if you didn't do it. But it's excitement, it's anticipation. It's saying, I believe in this thing and I want to partner with you through the process of seeing what God will do with it. So we've talked about encouragement and praise. We've talked about modeling our creative process and inviting one another into that process. We've talked a little about different forms of anticipation, the way that we can help one another to maintain hope and faith over the course of a project. The last one, the fifth one I want to talk about is practical help. We can do so much good for one another simply by offering the gift of practical help. I think this is a big one. I remember when a friend was giving me a ride to the airport, I was headed out on a speaking engagement, and boy, the first few days of getting ready for that conference, getting everything in my suitcase, doing all the things I need to do, not just as a teacher, but also as a mother. It was frantic. And I was really a mess that morning when he took me to the airport. And I appreciated the ride to the airport, but here's something that happened in the car on the way. He pulled out a small bag of snacks, and it was filled with actually some of my favorite things, some of my favorite snacks. And he said, here, you've got a long flight ahead of you today. I've prepared a little lunch bag, a little snack bag for you. So in the airport and on the plane and through all of your connections, you can be sure that you've got a little something to snack on. I was amazed. It never would have occurred to me to put together a little snack bag to take with me on a day trip. And I felt so cared for and so understood, so loved. And that sense of practical help and support sometimes is the difference between believing that we can accomplish something and wondering if we've got what it takes. So here's the thing about practical help. Most of us aren't very good at asking for help. Most of us aren't very good at saying, hey, can you help me? Or, hey, I kind of need a hand here. So here's what I think it means to cultivate a culture of resonators. I think that we get very, very good at asking each other two very simple questions. Is there anything you need right now? And is there anything I could do to help? Is there anything that you need right now? Is there anything I could do to help? It's so much easier for us to offer help and to ask questions, and than it is for us to actually tap each other on the shoulder and say, hey, I could really use something right now. I really need this right now. I'm struggling right now in this way with this thing. It would make a big difference if you could do this small thing. I think about Lewis Tolkien and the Inklings again. And one of the ways that they offered one another practical help is that during the war, there were incredible shortages of all kinds of things, of food, of particular kinds of products. But one of the things there was a tremendous shortage of was paper. So if you're a writer and there's a shortage of paper, that's pretty huge. The Inklings made it their habit to gather paper. And when they met for their Thursday meetings, they would bring paper so anybody who had paper would give what they had. Anybody who needed paper would take what they need. We may not think of the key to the success of The Lord of the Rings or the Chronicles of Narnia being the paper that they provided for one another. But when you're digging through the archives at the Bodleian or at other places where we have the original manuscripts, so often on the back is a laundry list, a scratch outline, a section of a draft of a different work from a different member of the group, because they were generous in figuring out, is there anything that you need right now? And is there anything I could do to help? Well, there's a lot that we could say about becoming a resonator over the course of this day. I hope that you will talk together and come up with more ideas on how you can support each other and how you can identify one or two things that will help you thrive in this season of your creative life. Let me close with this. Shortly after my first book about the Inklings was published, I was giving a lecture, and at the end of the lecture, one of my friends came up to me and said, you're talking about resonators. Do you know what a resonator is? And I said, well, I understand it conceptually. A resonator is someone that vibrates at the same frequency as another, who fundamentally understands and supports the work of another. And he shook his head and he laughed and he said, that's too complicated. Let me show you a resonator. And he took me over to the side of the stage, and there by the side of the stage was a piano. Now, I'm not a musician. I don't know anything about pianos. And he said, look at the piano. And he lifted the top and he said, do you see the strings? He said, you think that when you listen to the piano during our worship today, you were listening to the strings, but that's only partially true. The reason that you could hear the music of those strings is because the body of a piano is a resonator, and it takes what is small and delicate and faint, and it amplifies it and shares it so that all can participate in the beauty of that sound. Let's keep at it. Let's be resonators for one another. Let's listen to one another, help one another, support one another, encourage one another. Let's give hope and express commitment that in the work that we're doing, we're not going to do it alone. Let's find ways to be resonators in person throughout the day today, and importantly, over the long haul, through the various environments that we will go home to. Thank you for letting me be here today. I hope you have a wonderful day. I hope that it's an exquisite conference, and that God really meets you. The God who is everywhere is abundantly here where you are. In Jesus' name, thank you.